everybody. Glad that you're here today, as every day. And we've got Neil Bowman today to talk about native plants. And I'm going to turn it over to Neil, other than all of his relatives that happen to be my relatives too. So we're kin to this. So I'm going to let you, if you would, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Glad that the museum is opening, this forum up, and I think it's nice for the community to be able to have different lectures.
Is that microphone on?
Needs to be repositioned.
Well, this is new to me. Is that loud enough? Do I need to talk a little louder into it?
How's that?
I'm used to walking around, the woods, talking to people, or out in gardens, and doing it in a one-on-one situation. I have been in court in this position here a couple of times. So different setup, but I guess you all are here because you enjoy native plants. I'm not too sure your background. So I'm going to head on the different aspects of different plants, go over a little history of some plants, some of the uses. The pictures aren't really in order, so for now, that's a fringe tree. It's an American fringe tree. If you're into landscaping and want something that smells, get a fringe tree. The scent on those, you don't have to walk up to it and smell it. But going in order, what I had was, the first one was American ginseng. I brought plants. I don't know how passing them around is going to work, but I figured, ginseng is probably one that a lot of people would know about, but may have not seen. So I wanted to bring a representation of it. That is one that is on the endangered list, and mainly because of poachers. A lot of people try to grow it, and then they grow it, and then it gets poached. It's some of the interesting things people would do when they are growing it as a forest product. They'll put cats out. If you wanted to grow this in your landscaping, chipmunks, moles, voles, everything goes after it. So ginseng growers will actually get cats and put them out in their grows. So it's it's a little bit of interesting information I picked up from some growers. And also, to preserve ginseng, they have found that the same compounds that are in the root that everybody wants is in the leaves. So you can just harvest the leaves. You would do that, as the berries turn red, then you go in and harvest the leaves right before the leaves turn yellow. That is a good way to conserve the crop. Let's see. And then, like as far as the landscape value, that is one thing, I mentioned I was going to talk about uses. I encourage everybody to plant these plants in their landscape. They don't take up a lot of room. You can plant them under shrubs, trees. They add to the diversity and things like that. So the red berries are, for mammals, chipmunks and stuff like that. If you plant them in your landscape, that's probably the best value from ginseng, other than it's a plant to show and tell people that you may have. And I will pass around a bottle of ginseng root.
If you want to, Neil, you can put it on that back table, and when you're finished, they can come up and ask you questions about the individuals.
All right, well, we'll do it like that. I have an example of the actual ginseng root. There are different ways to grow it. You can tell that this is farm raised because the root is straight. If you take ginseng roots to dealers, they can tell how it's grown. Out in the woods has the best value. And if you did grow ginseng for the value of it, I would try to grow gigantic ginseng over, a decade. and sell them and try to auction them off. The Chinese look for roots that look like people or look, and that's where the real value is. Little roots like this, I mean, there's just no value. There's also some example of seeds that I'll have up here as well. And this is a plant that, and I don't know if anybody's seen it on trails around here, but I've not seen it on any trails around here. But you can grow, I do grow that here. I live in the city, and so I grow that here, and it could grow in your landscape. All these plants I grow here. I grow them in the ground, in containers, and raised beds. I just experiment with different ways of growing them. So, bloodroot is another one. It's in the poppy family, but I have some examples of some of the roots. These were, I had pulled them up, they were growing where they shouldn't have been growing. But being in the poppy family, they do have a rich history in medicine. But at the same time, they're poisonous. It can be poisonous. And people have experimented with a thing called black salve, as a cancer prevention. But then things have really gone wrong because it's real strong and will burn into your skin, and even can intensify some skin cancers. So I just, some of the medicinal uses that these things have been used for, I don't know if I would use them. Another popular use of bloodroot is in dyeing. That's probably one of the better uses if you were to use it in that way. It's also used in a landscape. It can become a ground cover if you left it protected. So the turkey will eat them, deer, graze them, rabbits. So you really do have to protect this if you want to grow it in your landscape. And this is one that is common to find on all the trails around Martinsville and Henry County. And then it's also one of the first bloomers, so it's good for the snow pictures if you're looking for a flower that's blooming and collect snow on it. That's one of the first signs of spring is when the bloodroot starts coming up. Another one I have a small example of it, and it's in trillium, it's jewelweed. And the jewelweed is the smaller plant, though it can, in my garden, has gotten up to 6 feet. It's common on all the trails around here that are around water. There's 2 varieties. There's an orange and a yellow, just in the flowers. The rest of the plant looks the same. The deer go crazy over it. And ginseng, bloodroot growers, they will grow jewelweed over top of their ginseng and bloodroot to protect it from deer. Though, and in me experimenting with that, they eat down past the jewelweed and to the bloodroot. So it's just another thing for them to eat. But that is very, the hummingbirds really do like it. So if you're into hummingbirds, and you have a little protected area, that's a plant you can grow. And a lot of these plants, if the deer do eat them and you have a problem with them in your yard, you can hide them and camouflage them around other plants, besides just caging them. That's a way to grow them and get them to start self-seeding. So, and jewelweed is, as far as, it is valuable medicinally, and a lot of people use bloodroot for poison ivy. Well, jewelweed is, to me, a safer and better alternative, and it's also, I guess, the way jewelweed reseeds, it's also more self-sustaining to use jewelweed than bloodroot. And jewelweed is used for things like hives, poison ivy, stinging nettle, other skin and sore irritations. A lot of people make soap out of it, and if you're out in the woods and you have an irritation and there's some around, you can just rub the leaves on them yourself. So it is a good plant to have. The next one to talk about is it's one that's starting to become threatened in a lot of areas because of poaching as well, and mainly because of its history, and it's celebrated in festivals, high-end restaurants, and farmers markets, and those are ramps. They kind of just look like a lily. They don't look like too much. They started coming up about a month ago, and at this time, I guess probably in another month, the leaves would disappear, and then afterwards a white flower comes up after all the leaves are gone. But what is sought after is the bulb. I don't have any examples of those. But the bulbs, the chefs and stuff, especially on social media and everything, they love to use the bulbs as like a garlic, strong, oniony type taste. But you can use just the leaves and get that same taste. So if you found 5 plants, you could dig up a bulb or 2 and then just use the rest leaves. That is the poaching of that and ginseng have become major issues, especially in northern states. But it is an interesting plant, and it was valued by the Native Americans as one of the first greens to come out for its nutrients and stuff. And they showed those to the settlers, and the settlers recognized that flavor and taste from the homeland, from related plants, and that's why it became so popular in Appalachia, and has stayed popular in Appalachia with the traditions that were just passed down. But there are reliable, and with all these plants, there are reliable sources that you can get them from and order them from, be it seeds, bulbs. So if you are interested, again, it's like I encourage you to try planting them. False indigo. This is one that's been used a long time through history. There were medicinal values, but mainly it was used as a dye plant as well. The Native Americans used it, and then I guess Levi Stratus in the late 1800s with false indigo blue jeans. They became popular, and that was probably the height of its marketability. Now it's still used as dyes. That's probably about the only thing it's used for. It does have a lot of landscape value. It gets the size of about a small bush, but it dies back to the ground. It will leave purple seed pods over the winter, which creates a good winter interest. And also these plants, with the flowers getting 5 to 7 feet in good areas, normally staying about 4 to 5 feet, you can make like a hedgerow with those in your landscape. And you would definitely want to put them at the back of your flower beds, and then have smaller plants to grow in front of them and stuff. But it's very valuable. The bees, they really love it. I don't know if anybody else has had any experience with it as far as using it in your landscape, but that's one that's been good. It also is host to several different butterflies as well. Trillium. This is a toadshade trillium. There's at least 3 varieties that I know of in the county. There's robin wake, a sweet white trillium. The robin wake is red. This one would have a red flower as well. And then I'm not too sure if there's a yellow trillium. There's yellow trillium that's native to Virginia. I'm just not too sure if it's in this county or not. But the most places I've seen the trillium are actually on the ridgeway trails around here, and the different walking trails that are out down by the river. They put some of the trails right through trillium patches. So if you walk those trails, you will see them. But they're interesting. The ants actually carry that's how their seeds disperse. They open up and these little, you know, like BBs size seeds are in there, and the ants will carry them off to different places, and that's how it spreads. And it will take 4 to 7 years for some of these trilliums to get to maturity to where they will bloom. So, you know, when you see some that are blooming, you know that's an old patch. And they do, you know, they will spread through their rhizomes as well. Dividing them is a great way to, you know, obtain more of them. And they were used medicinally as astringents and expectorants. So, you know, they do have a medicinal use, and they were actually even called, the Native Americans, they were referred to as an Indian balm that the Native Americans made out of them. But now, you know, people have started using other things. Black cohosh. It's a big one. I'll just put it up here briefly. These get tall, and then they'll have a flower spike that's probably 2 feet taller than those and white. Bees mainly pollinate it, and they can form dense clumps and stuff. The deer have been damaging mine lately, but usually they had left it alone. But black cohosh is taken off through its medicinal properties. If you just Google black cohosh like I did, try to figure out how to spell the Latin name, no information about the plant comes up. It's all medical uses and stuff, and it's all based around menopause. So you know, that can be found, supplements can be found in GNC, CVS, you know, anywhere. So, you know, that's another plant that it can be grown in the landscape, it can be used. It grows pretty common around here. The best place I've seen it is right below Philpott Dam on the gravel road, you know, just out through that area. That's one of the better areas to go, you know, see a lot of diversity in the wildflowers that we have in this area. But there's a lot of black cohosh out there. There's also a blue cohosh that grows in the area, and I know it's out around the Fieldale area. But its leaves, it looks very similar, but the leaves are rounded, where these are more pointy. And it produces actually berries, and these produce seeds. So that, you know, that's a different way to tell them apart in the fall. So that's, you know, that's another good one that we have around here. And if you did grow it in your landscaping, like there's Mayaples growing in that pot with that one, that's a good plant to grow on top of something. You know, if you could grow it on top of ginseng, you could grow it on top of, you know, a lot of plants that stay low to the ground. So some of the other stuff I have, moving towards some trees. And some people told me I shouldn't play it, so I didn't bring the song for you all to walk into. It was Hank Williams Jr.'s, his most recorded song. The chorus went jambalaya, crawfish pie, filet gumbo. So filet gumbo, that's the crushed leaves of the sassafras tree. And that is one of the easier trees to identify in the woods because it has 3 different types of leaves, very distinct. So you just collect those leaves, crush them up, grind them, and you have filet gumbo. And what that is it's mainly a New Orleans, Gulf of Mexico thing. Over there, the Native Americans use that in their gumbos and stews as a thickener. Really would not be used in cooking. It would, when you finish cooking your stews, soups, or gumbos, you would add it in after the cooking is done to thicken it up. Sometimes it's served on the table, so you would thicken it up at the table. But on the East Coast, okra is used mainly due to the slave trade and, you know, okra coming over. So that's East Coast gumbo has okra, Gulf Coast has filet gumbo. But to be called filet gumbo as it's sold in restaurants, it has to contain sassafras tree leaves. And that is probably the one thing I would only try from the sassafras tree. You know, we all hear about sassafras tea, and you know, it was used to be used as the base for root beer, but it's also poisonous. And they've, you know, recently done studies on those poisons. It's safrarol, and the FDA has banned safrarol, and so you know you need to be very careful when drinking the teas and stuff if you do make it from the roots, and you know decide to use that. But the limit in the leaves is, you know, there's no safrarol in the leaves, or it's very low to where the FDA has no warnings on the use of the leaves. So you could still make a tea from the leaves as well, you know, if you were interested in doing teas and doing a little bit safer. But that was something I hadn't known about the sassafras trees, something I just learned. You know, they're doing a lot more studies and testing on these plants, and you're finding a lot more toxins. Unfortunately, another one that has the toxins, I just brought the tip of a limb, and the bloom is a pawpaw tree. And there are lots of pawpaws in this region, and I think the pawpaws in my area have really taken off because the deer have eaten everything else, and the toxins are in the leaves, and they will not eat pawpaw trees. So now pawpaws, that's all what's all in my woods. But the toxin that's in them, you know, it's linked to Parkinson's. So especially if you had concerns with Parkinson's running in your family, it might be something you would want to avoid. But people still do eat it, and I'm not too sure of the science. I do know the guy who started the Pawpaw Festival in North Carolina has Parkinson's. So, you know, that's, you know, I'm sure he ate a lot more than any of us would ever eat. But it's just, it's interesting science. But the flowers, you know, they come out before the leaves, and then the leaves, you know, start to come out after the flowers have come out. They're pollinated by flies, and people used to hang meat in the trees to attract flies to get extra pollination. But now, luckily, people have started working, coming up with better cultivars. There's a guy named Peterson in Harper's Ferry that, you know, if you were interested in growing pawpaws, I would look up his website and get a cultivar that has smaller seeds, more pulp, and a lot of the toxins are in the seeds and in the pulp. So, you know, if you do eat it, make sure you get all that out. And Kentucky State University, they actually have a department dedicated to the pawpaw tree. So you can go there and find out all kinds of information on pawpaws, pawpaw recipes. They have a good bread recipe that, you know, you can make like a banana bread, except for pawpaw bread. You can make pies. You know, there's a lot of good uses in the pawpaws. And I actually have some of the seeds. So if you're walking along in the woods and you're wondering, you know, what are these large brown seeds I'm seeing, you can come up here and see that they're pawpaw seeds. There's another tree, a persimmon tree, that has similar seeds, but they're a lot smaller. And I would say they're more uniformed as well compared to the pawpaw trees. And persimmon, that's another good tree. Like if you wanted something to eat in your yard, persimmons, I enjoy them. You know, where I work at Old Salem. I guess, you know, I didn't do too good of an introduction on myself. I'm just now realizing. But I work at Old Salem in North Carolina, and they have quite a few persimmon trees. And I have learned this year that, you know, you can eat persimmons before it frosts. As long as they will let go of the tree. If you have to pull them off the tree, you do not want them. But especially if you find a fresh one that's laying on the ground and it's kind of soft and it fell off naturally, I mean, they're good to eat way before the frost. But they will pucker you up if you get the wrong one. So persimmon tree would be, you know, that's a good tree. I think there's one on Dick and Willie Trail out past where Domino's used to be located, like you're going back towards that Burger King. I don't know which direction that trail is, but I know that there's that persimmon tree out there, or at least used to be out there a few years ago. And leatherwood, here's a tree that I figured I had to talk about if I came here to talk about native trees. It's a native tree, and luckily somebody just gave me this one because I had a couple, but I gave those away. But this, you know, leatherwood, you have Leatherwood Creek, which was named for the tree, which in turn, Leatherwood Plantation, Patrick Henry's home, was named for. And with these trees, with the name, the settlers saw the way the Native Americans were using them, and it was like leather. It was used for making baskets, making rope, and it was thought to be tough as leather, and hence the name leatherwood. They're kind of hard to find. They're in the Chatmoss area of the county. It's where I know that they're most plentiful. There were some mountain biking trails that used to be out there. I know they were on those trails. I'm not too sure if that's, to be honest with you, private property or public property, or if they're even maintained anymore. But that's a very good, interesting tree, and that would be good for the landscape. It grows about 5 feet tall, but it will take the form of a miniature tree the way the trunk goes out. And so it would be good like in rock gardens, when you have smaller plants and stuff, and that would be like a foundation plant. And it does have the flowers come out way before the leaves do. They're little yellow bell flowers. So they're one of the first flowers to emerge in the spring. And so it does have that interest. After that, it looks like a green bush. You know, if you trim it and keep the tree form, that's the cool part of it. So that, you know, that's another one that you could incorporate into your home. And then the chestnut tree, I brought that. This is not a pure American chestnut tree. This is, you know, the one the Forest Service is now selling. That's not the best specimen of one, and something ate the tops of some of the leaves off 2 days ago. So, but you know, the deer love those. A lot of the stuff I grow, I started out growing a vegetable garden, and I have to start it out inside fences of my old vegetable garden, and just to keep the deer and stuff away. But you know, the chestnut tree, I guess that's, you know, that's the icon of the East Coast forest. It was the, you know, the redwood of the East. Hopefully it'll still make a comeback. They are, you know, it's not truly extinct, it's functionally extinct. There are chestnut trees you can go out and see. Last Memorial Day, I took a hike up to Audrey Murphy's memorial on the Appalachian Trail. And then I went to the overlook, and at first I was like, man, they got these trees in the way, you can't see anything. And I was like, oh, those are chestnut trees. And they were blooming. So I thought that was, you know, pretty cool. And I wouldn't have identified them if I didn't have those I've just gotten from the Forest Service, I would just been like, trees in my way. So you still can go on hikes and find these trees, and they're still producing nuts, and those nuts, usually people know about those trees, the nuts are collected, they're sent off, and then the, Chestnut Foundation, they work with them, and they're trying to get them past the blight. We had a neighbor who grew up in Rockcastle Gorge, and I thought it was pretty cool. I need to get some water. He remembered, and he just passed away. He was in his 90s, and he remembered the chestnut tree that had fallen over. And he was a kid playing on that chestnut tree that had fallen over 90 years ago. So that tree is still out there today. And I think that's just, it's pretty cool that a tree can withstand time, even dead, that long. So, that would be, if you had the property, that would be a good one to add to your property. And then another one to this area that, I think is a great tree to replace the Collier pear or Bradford pear that my family knows I hate. And I say that because my family's here, and people are always sending text messages of Bradford pears, and I'm like, saw them down and put killer on the stump. That is one way I don't use killer usually at all, but with invasive trees, invasive vines or anything, if you cut them down and you have like concentrated brush killer and a paintbrush, just cut it down, paint right on top of that stump. That way you're not getting the killer anywhere else. It sucks it straight down to the roots. And if you're worried, it still might come back, we'll cut the stump a little high, and if it does sprout back, you can cut it again and reapply it. And after a second, application, usually that tree's gone. But so I would, use the serviceberry in place of the Bradford pear. The serviceberry has a lot of, benefits as far as our native pollinators, and it's the host of several different insects as well. Plus it does have berries that you can, make different things out of as well. The museum actually has service berries. Where are they located? I know y'all did a post on them. Right out front. Okay. So they're right out front, and if y'all have Instagram, go to the museum's Instagram page, and then go back and you'll see them blooming right out here. And one reason they have the name serviceberry is in the mountainous areas, and I'm not too sure of the region, it wouldn't be for here. When they started blooming, you knew the ground was soft enough to dig a hole to bury somebody. So I don't know what they did with them all winter, if they were just set the bodies in the ice house and waited for the serviceberries to bloom. But that's how it got its name, serviceberry. And there's another name, shad, and it has to do with the shad, and you all mentioned that in the post as well. That's when it blooms when the shad are running up the rivers. So that's two ways it got two different names. So that, it does not grow the form of a Bradford pear, but it does bloom, and it has that same look about it when it does bloom. So I think that would, be a great addition. How much time?
Half hour, just
Okay.
do what you like.
All right. So did y'all have any questions with any of these that I've discussed so far? Have y'all seen any, good places? Certain wildflowers may stand out. I know on the Fieldale Trail, once you go out towards the end of it, there used to be a huge area under a tree that was just covered in bluebells. Some of these areas, I think that may have been a little off the trail. I guess I shouldn't recommend walking off the trails, but if you see something, you know, it's interesting to go check out and see what's there. Yes, ma'am.
When you were talking about the trillium,
Yes.
I remember over on Smith Lake Road
Okay.
in Martinsville, there's a little sheltered cove back in there that used to be full of trillium in the spring.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. You know, I haven't seen a lot of populations like that. One I actually saw, it was sad to see, it was by a dumpster in Bassett, and kudzu covered everything. So as soon as the trillium came, you know, bloomed, they were covered with kudzu. Do any of y'all know? Yes, ma'am.
That gravel road you were talking about going to the base of the dam, we saw just a few days ago, the bank on the right was full of trillium.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Ginseng is a pretty big demand for it. It can sell for $600 a pound of roots. Because one white man wants to buy 200 pounds of roots to ship overseas. So if you dig up some ginseng, you do pretty good. But while you're digging in the corner, there's other competition. You have to be careful to keep from getting shot by somebody else. Someone else's land, so it's a difficult thing to dig, but it's an interesting story with ginseng. 600,000 pounds of roots, and that's wholesale.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people go looking for it. And that's why I started growing it. And then I got so frustrated in trying to grow it, I was like, I'm never going to be able to, you know, grow it the way other people grow it. And I have, when you go to some of these ginseng, like you hear people grow ginseng, you know, you may think that they just have some seeds thrown out here, but I mean, I've seen places that are just rows of ginseng, probably 3 foot wide, and as far as you can see under tree cover, and it's like row after row. It's like it's like growing corn. But there are, like I said, there's, you know, that would get graded, and that wouldn't get graded the highest because it isn't growing naturally. And that also changes the whole ecosystem when they grow it like that. You know, it kind of just makes that forest almost like a cornfield. You know, not a lot of ecological value. But yeah, ginseng and it's one that I don't see a lot around here, and I've read that it is one of the ones that will not come back after logging. So, and you know, some of the people's properties around here, most everybody's properties probably been logged. I mean, you think about it from the colonists coming over. I mean, how many times your property's probably been logged? And you know, over time, those populations just slowly dwindle because they don't recover as quick as somebody coming back in and planting seedlings. So, you know, that's interesting. Have any of y'all seen any?
There's lots of things that grow alongside the Smith River on our trails. The Fieldale Trail has a large patch of Virginia bluebells off the side of it as you're hiking out it. They're on the right.
Okay.
And it's always has been. I have stories of my grandparents talking about going looking at the wildflowers, and they were probably looking as much for medicinals as they were but there were Dutchman's britches on that trail. I've seen them growing up near the industrial part of the trail when they talk about the industries. The bleeding hearts, especially on the Smith River, the road going up to the dam, there's a lot of places along there that grow bleeding hearts. And both trilliums, two of the trilliums, depending on where you are, the red one and the white one.
Okay.
But we used to go up wandering through there, and it was back in the day where it wasn't politically incorrect to dig and take home with you. And I had a grandmother and a wild aunt who would always, we'd go out some Sundays and she'd say, way up there, see that? Those banks were pretty stiff. And I would do whatever she told me. But we
Where'd she
skipped.
have you?
We quit digging improperly and started preaching the gospel of letting them get ripe in place.
Yes. Yeah, that's one thing you want to do is make sure you're getting them from, a reputable source, or especially when it, it comes to some of the endangered ones. And I think also out in Philadelphia is blue cohosh.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of quite a few other. I saw golden seal in some of those areas, and that golden seal, it does have a lot of medicinal value. I would use it as a ground cover in landscaping. Especially if it's protected. It spreads primarily through root. It does have a beautiful red berry in the fall. That's neon, and it's almost too bright for your telephone camera. So that is an interesting plant, and you can divide those up as well. Like if you're trying to make a good ground cover, just keep dividing them. And so that's one of the good medicinal ones. And if you were interested in growing them, I'll be honest, from what I've seen, and NC State probably has some of the best information as far as wildflowers and stuff. And here's a book, and there's probably been updates to it. Growing and marketing ginseng, golden seal, and other woodland medicinals. I bought it just for the growing. At the time, now you can find a lot of information on the internet, but at the time there was not a lot of information on how to grow these different woodland plants. And this book right here, and it's from a lady named Jeannie Davis. You all probably read publications from her. But if not, she's a great one to look up as far as research. They have a research station in western North Carolina, but they go into growing all the different aspects as far as growing, the environmental part that you need to grow the certain ones, and also what you need to watch out for as far as predators and poachers and all that information. I'm trying to think, elderberry, like if you were interested in growing medicinal natives, elderberry would be a tree that I would recommend. I haven't seen a lot of negative health information. Again, always check with your doctor. I'm not recommending anything. Don't hold me liable. If you were interested in growing native plants for hummingbirds, jewelweed, which we went over, is a great one. Columbine, Indian pink, bee balm. Those are some good ones. Ground covers, like there's a golden ragwort, or your native gingers. There's even a false lily of the valley, because what we all call lily of the valley, it may seem like it's native because so many people have it, but that was brought over. The false lily of the valley looks pretty much identical, except for it's a lot smaller. And then you could even use galax and running cedar as ground covers, but those are kind of hard. The top butterfly ones, of course, everybody knows probably is milkweed, joe pie weed, ironweed. And right now in the spring, the butterflies are hitting the azaleas. I don't know what all you all may have that, have the butterflies on them right now, but azaleas are the main thing I have. As far as the host plants for butterflies, the pawpaw is one thing I didn't mention. The zebra swallowtail, that's the only host plant for the zebra swallowtail. So if you've seen those, you know, you probably have some pawpaws around. And it is, you know, it is America's largest fruit. I mean, you know, when we talk about the fruit, as far as native. The spice bush, there's a bush called the spice bush, and it's a small bush, 3 to 5 feet, and it has bright red berries in the fall. And you break the twigs and stuff, and it smells spicy. And it was used as black pepper when black pepper got high back in the colonial days. Now it's not used for that as much, but it is also the host plant for the spice bush swallowtail. And then, of course, milkweed, not only for the different butterflies and for the flowers, but for the monarchs. You know, oak trees, I think that's one of the things that, you know, we aren't planting nowadays. And they host a large number of you know, native insects. And, you know, you don't see oak trees at Lowe's and the box stores and stuff. But that's very important, especially if y'all have the deer like I have deer. It's like they need something to eat. The deer in the city are starving. I mean, they eat the spice bush. I kind of look at, I don't know how y'all look at things, but man might be the number one in, you know, and doing damage to the environment, but deer have to be number 2 right now. They are not letting the native plants restore themselves in our forests, in the cities, and I walk in my woods and all I see is barberry. And if you all have barberry, I think it was University of Connecticut just did testing some barberry sites, and they have the highest tick populations. So that's another reason to get rid of barberries, is because they also have the highest mouse populations, because the mice use them for protection from predators. So, you know, it's not, deer are really like number 2 as far as tick carriers to mice in some areas. I don't know about here, but but yeah, you know, you have Oregon grapes and autumn olives. It's you know, it was interesting once I cleaned things up to realize, wow, I've got rid of all the non-native species, and I really do not have anything growing. So if you do grow things like this, you can grow them and put a cage around them. This is one we did not go over, and it's a native geranium. But the seeds on this, if you were to put this out in your yard, put a cage over it, the seeds would shoot up to 30 feet. So you could cage this one, and potentially it's shooting off seeds everywhere, and then you get them growing in different directions, and hopefully the deer will miss 1 or 2, and then, you know, they start shooting. And that's kind of the way I've tried to take different strategies. Like if I want something to take over an area, like bloodroot, I plant it at the top of the hill. I mean, seeds travel downhill, so why plant it at the bottom? Plant it at the top, let the seeds go downhill. And the seeds on the bloodroot actually have a little thing that comes out and just pulls itself along the ground until it finds a little crevice to crawl into. It's got like a little arm that comes out. If you ever see fresh seeds that have popped open, you'll see it, and it's interesting. So, and also, you know, the ants help with it. Some of the other, you know, things I use, the internet's great, but, you know, I don't know, I still like books. So I still have my ones that I go to. As far as a guidebook on wildflowers and stuff, the way I would pick mine out would be whatever you know best, as far like if you know the most about bloodroot, and you open up a guidebook and you go over that section on bloodroot and it has all the information you expect to see, then that's, you know, that's probably a good book. if you feel like you know a lot and it's missing a lot, check out other ones. And also, like with this one, it's wildflowers of the Blue Ridge and Great Smoky Mountains. Well, in that, it doesn't say native. So, but you know, a lot of people would just look at that and think, wildflowers, that's native. But you know, it's like I just was glancing through it and it's like chicory. Chicory, everybody thinks is native because it's everywhere, but that was brought over by the settlers. And you know, it was used as coffee. You know, I'm sure you've heard about it if you watch Gunsmoke and Chester wanting to put it in his coffee. But so, you know, make sure you're getting the book. If you just want native plants, you know, make sure it does say native plants. And then there's some small guides that you could get, like, you know, butterfly guides. They don't cost as much, but they'll, you know, this one's the Butterfly and Moth Guide to Virginia. And I mean, that's something that's plastic coated, you can take with you, take out in the yard, and it covers them all. It's like $7. I don't know, inflation, maybe 12. And then, let's see, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, they put out a good brochure, you know, list all the different native plants and stuff for Virginia. So that, you know, a lot of the government departments, they have good resources if you can locate them. I'll be honest with you, I'm not too sure where I found this brochure as far as getting up with them. But you know, you can order stuff like this directly from them off the internet. And I guess with any remaining time, I don't know if y'all have any questions, or I can kind of go through some of the different pictures that we didn't get to go through.
How large does this, what'd you call it?
That's an American French tree.
How big does it get?
They'll get around 10 to 12 feet, depending, and you know, a lot of it's, you know, I hate to, there's such a swing in plants that, but 10 to 12 feet, and you know, that one is actually growing in the shade of a large willow oak tree. All these are from, like,
There's
from
a couple of those growing in the medium on 220 South, just south of Bassett Forks. It's one of the nurseries put it up as an advertisement to beautify it. But it has a couple of those fringe trees that are doing real well.
And you mentioned in that, the Mayo State Park, I'm not too sure how far Virginia's getting along with it, but I know that I smelt one of the, I don't know what it was. I was walking along the trails, and this was on the North Carolina side. This was out past what they advertise as the largest waterfall in Rockingham County. I don't know if y'all have been to that, but it's where Old Mill was set up. And I know that there are fringe trees out there, and I was just walking along, and I was like, what is that smell? And I just started walking through the woods, and you know, found it. I'm not too, it's probably 25, 30 feet away.
Wow.
So they will put out the smell. And that one was large. It was probably 15 feet. But that's it further back. The flowers, you know, they do emerge right before, but kind of at the same time as you see the flowers. And then that right there is black cohosh. You know, that's what the tall one that was underground. That spike gets 2 to 3 feet above, you know, the greenery there. And so it does have a nice flower spike. I'm not too sure.
You're back.
There's your peach tree again.
I'm gonna just hit slideshow, because that seems like that's the only way it's working, so I'll try to go fast.
I keep my fingers crossed.
So that, again, that's the American French tree. It was great for smell and stuff. Black cohosh, a lot of medicinal value. There's bloodroot. I mean, I think, as it comes up, it's one of the first signs to spring. And that's what it can look like as a ground cover. If you can keep the deer off of it, that's a hill I started, but the deer keep munching it down. That's the same hill. But that's been, that's a lot of years of growing. There's your false indigo. I wasn't too sure about bringing one, but I brought one. That's the false indigo with the balloons, and it's kind of in the hedgerow. I mean, that's, all that was self-seeded from one plant. There's your purple spikes. Ginger, little brown jug. As you see, that's my deer defense, those metal spikes sticking up through it. But I also have a picture where they ate down through those metal spikes. But that's a good ground cover as well. And that was a test to pick out the ginseng versus the poison oak versus Virginia creeper. I mean, so that's 3 different plants right there, but they all look like the ginseng. And there's some ginseng seeds before they turn red. And there's your plant. And that's where I try to hide them in with other plants, plus I'll have a cage over that. But there's, it's a decent sized root. The squirrels dug up. That's the only reason. And that's golden ragwort. That would make a great ground cover. Deer won't bother it. It turns yellow. It does get a little tall in that stage, but it's also evergreen, and you can use it for some slight erosion control. And there's your golden seal, and that's the red berry in the fall. And that right there is green and gold, and that's another good one for ground cover. Deer and rabbit do not bother it. It self-seeds. Those are around Mayo State Park on the North Carolina side. And I'm talking like along the river.
And what is it?
They're called green and gold.
Green gold.
And this is Indian pink. It's a native. I have not seen that around this area. That's it right before it gets ready to bloom. But that right there is another hummingbird magnet. And you can see how it just takes off. And the deer and the rabbit do not bother it as well.
What is that? Indian pink.
Yes. I always think it should be called Indian paintbrush because there's a native called Indian paintbrush. But,
There's the wild irises.
yes, and these are our native irises. The deer and rabbit do not bother them, and they would make a great year-round cover. That's around a big poplar tree right there. That's, the ground cover without the flowers. And then there is a white iris as well. And the blue irises, they're different, they're different shades of irises. So you can find different shades of irises in different regions. And that's jewelweed. And if I remember right, that's a damselfly. And you want those because they eat mosquitoes. And there's jewelweed with the bloom. And it's also called touch me not. And I have a list of some of the plants we've gone over with the Latin names if y'all are interested. And that's dwarf Joe Pye weed. If you're into butterflies, I think that's one you need to have. That's a zebra tail, swallowtail, milkweed. And those are Gulf, I can't remember.
Fritillaries.
Yes, Gulf fritillaries. And their host plant is violets. So, you know, they actually lay their larvae on the ground, so if you mow real close, and you have violets in your yard, you know, you may want to skip that area. And that was just more milkweed. There's your pawpaws. I think that's a boar, it's a hickory, might be a hickory borer, but flies usually pollinate it. But I thought it was interesting that it was pollinating the pawpaw. And there's what your pawpaw fruit looks like. They were loaded the other year. And those are ramps. I mean, I have some I was growing in raised beds. I have some I just stick around the yard, you know, under trees, along little trails I walk, just to try to get the population going. And there's just different ones with the toad-shaped trillium. And the chipmunks took all those out. And there's your white trillium. So it blooms, your trilliums do bloom at different times. And there's the yellow trillium, but I do not believe there are any around here. And I don't know where that is. So, it's a Dancing Creek Farm, in case you want to take your dogs there. Did you all have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. What do you do with those sales?
I'm a gardener, so I'll work out in, you know, in the gardens all day long. You know, people ask me sometimes about the buildings, and it's like, I don't know, I don't really go in. I know they cook stuff that we grow in the gardens, but it is, you know, it's an interesting place. It's all time-dated heirloom. They do have, you know, some natives. We do have natives down there. Not really medicinal at that time period. They didn't have medicinal gardens. Even back then, they started, you know, getting pharmacy companies to start producing their stuff. When they first moved to Bethabara in Winston-Salem, they did have medicinal gardens in the early 1700s. But it's hard to believe, you know, in the 1800s, it's like, you know, there is a lot of good medicine in these plants, but, you know, we just went strictly away from it.
So do you ever venture out to Bethabara or
I've-
Bethania?
I've been over there a couple of times. It's never, I'll be honest, it's not when they're open. And it was just timing. I didn't, you know, they kind of had limited hours and stuff, but they do offer a lot. And if you're into that type of thing, I would look at what Bethabara's doing, you know, and maybe incorporate that. If you came to Old Salem, you know, do both of them. I wish they had blacksmithing and stuff, and I wish Old Salem had
Do
blacksmithing.
you ever see ladies slippers anywhere?
Yes, and I hate to say this, but I had some marked on my GPS where they're widening 58 right across from Lover's Leap, and I didn't realize they were going to start this soon, and I would have gone and dug all those up, but I never touched them. You know, I would just go out there and take pictures of them. That was one area that had a huge amount of diversity. And I mean, it's going right there through D. Hart Park.
We had them in the woods behind our house growing up in field day.
Okay.
And we always thought they were the most fascinating things. We said, Mama, let's take them out. You leave them right where God put them.
Yeah.
You don't bother them, you just look. But we always watched for them to bloom because we thought they were so pretty.
Well, you were lucky to have them, all right, because I mean, they're hard to find. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know a plant called the strawberry bush?
Yes, right here. Also called Hearts of Bursting.
Hearts are bursting.
I call it deer crack. Yes. I had that, I've tried to hide it in sweet bush, like, you know, because sweet bush, it doesn't really offer a lot to look at. So I have some growing in sweet bush, spice bush, because they're kind of lanky and stuff. But even that, being in my garden last year, the rabbits got through the fence and ate every single one I had down to the ground. So that's why that one has about 5 different stems coming out. But yeah, it is a beautiful plant.
In 2 seasons.
Is that, you've had yours 2 seeds?
And it's beautiful in 2 different seasons.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, the fall color and the leaves, and the flowers aren't that showy, but then the red berries, well, whatever, however you want to call
Hearts bursting.
them. Yeah, that open up. They're, about the size of a strawberry, and it opens up and there's orange seeds inside. And it will readily reseed. So I do have some that I'll put cages around, and there will be seedlings everywhere. Yeah, I did bring a couple of plants that I didn't go over just.
I told my neighbors that, I wouldn't be surprised if I came out and found out the deer had eaten the bumper off the car.
It's bad. I mean, it's bad. I count, anywhere up to 15 when I go walk my dog at times. And if you think back to colonial days, when you didn't have all these factories, all these buildings, all these malls, all these houses taking up areas where they would have food. Back then, they were shipping, 250,000 deer hides back to England. And